Good morning and welcome back to Hesketh Emporium, and today we are making a project for Handmade Workshop in May 2025, which is running on the 30th and the 31st. But this is to show the participants and anybody else post-workshop how to make this amazing project. And what we're going to be making is like a little vault / security bag for your wardrobe, your closet, I don't know, whatever people call them, but it's designed to hang in your cupboard, and it'll become a little bit clearer as we go along. And I will show you some pictures as well of the one I've already made. Gather your supplies together. I'm going to use two different types of fabric. You only actually need one though, but I'm going to be using this grey blue floral design as the outer, and I'm going to probably use this blue stripe just for the welt pocket or the welt, and that'll become clear what that is in a bit. You also need a zip, or you could, I suppose, use press studs or cam snaps or even Velcro if you don't have a zip or you're not confident making this with a zip. And of course you need a coat hanger. Absolutely, really any shape or size that you want, because you're going to freehand cut this pattern out. And instead of the stripe for the welt, which we turn around to the back of the project, I will show you that in a bit. You could also use interfacing. This is a type of padded interfacing, but it just happens to be what I had on hand, and you could cut it out of this. This is basically a type of lining in this case, and I will show you that on the other bag that I've already made when we get to it. But today I'm not going to use that. I am instead going to just use a piece of this blue in order to make that lining. So here we go. Grab your supplies. This one can go out of the way because we don't need it. I'm going to open up my fabric. I want 2 layers, front and the back effectively. And it needs to be the width plus seam allowances, plus a little bit extra of the item. Okay. That's not too bad. If you can have a see there, I've got it a little bit. Let me just see if I can go out a little bit more so you can see it. Yes, that's probably a bit better. I'm going to just leave a gap on each side. There's already a fold here. That doesn't matter because it'll get cut off just now. And you can make the bag as long or as short as you want. I'm going to make it probably about that long from the bottom of the hanger, that long from the top of the hanger here, because I can then put wallets in it, money, bank cards, whatever you like. Get this bottom edge nice and straight. So this one needs a trim. I'm just going to grab my scissors over here and just trim this bottom a little bit straighter than it currently is. Now you could rip this. In fact, let me show you that. So I'm going to rip this straight because then it rips along the grain line, and the grain runs in 2 directions. So you get the weft going across and you get the warp going this way. I always jokingly say this is warp speed ahead. So that's the long grain. If you think that here's my loom, I'm busy weaving the fabric, all these pieces of thread get attached to the loom this direction, very long, the length of whatever the fabric is that they're making. And then they take the weft threads and they go in and out through the warp threads here. And that weave creates your fabric. And if they've created it well, you'll get a lovely straight line on the weft and on the warp. And those are the straight grain of your fabric. So if you think these are the straight grain, one up, one across, then this is the diagonal. Okay, that is across the diagonal. And if you're going to make something across the diagonal, or the bias as it's usually called, then you would put it along here like that. But that's another story entirely. So in order to see if I can get this edge really straight, I can use my rulers. Grab one quickly. This is a quilting ruler. And of course you can place that on there. You can line it up absolutely straight on this edge. You could draw a line with your pencil or something that will come out if you needed to. It's very faint and you can cut it. Okay. However, you can also rip it, and to rip you would actually just put a little snip in the side, and then you can rip along that. It'll tear along that weft thread. Okay, and you can see it actually is tearing perfectly straight. There you go. Looks a bit of a mess at the moment, and I'll show you exactly what's happened here. This is not folded straight because that hasn't torn straight. But the top layer, which is the correct one over there, has actually torn exactly on the line I drew. So I'm just going to cut along here to get the bottom edge straight. So the disadvantages of doing that by ripping your fabric is that not only does it make lots of threads, but it also puckers the fabric a little bit. So if you're going to do that, make sure you iron it afterwards. But I've now got a nice straight bottom edge. I've got my distance that I think will look nice. And I'm now going to just say, okay, I want to leave a seam allowance above here, and I'm going to cut along there. So I'm going to just rip it again. I'm going to put a little mark over here to show where I want to cut. Get rid of that ruler. Put a little snip in the side here. Whoops, sorry about the bumping the camera. Move my coat hanger out the way, and I just rip fabric that I need. Now the rest can get put away. Let me show you what I was saying about it making a bubbly edge. You can possibly just see that it's not straight anymore. It's straight, but it's got a bump to it. And then you get these warp threads coming undone. And this is part of the weaving. And depending on how well the fabric, depending on the quality, rather, of the fabric, this will come out for ages and you'll get this frilly edge, which in some applications is really nice. But we don't need that for now. Going back to folding it the way it was, we can see, oh my goodness, this fabric is really badly printed along. It's off grain completely. And the reason I know that is because, look, I've just torn that along the grain. And that line is 100% not 90 degrees to that line. But I'm going to be cutting that off, so I'm not too worried about it. But it just goes to show you can't always tell. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our coat hanger, giving ourselves a nice bit of seam allowance at the top. I'm going to bring it down a bit because of that. We're going to place it in the middle. Make sure it's reasonably square to the bottom. And the reason for that is so that your zip and everything goes in nice. So that I'm going to find a mark there. I'm going to find a similar mark over here, and that's great. So now I know it's reasonably square to my fabric. Take your marker, and all I want to do is trace the top edge of this coat hanger to give me the shape, but I don't want to mark it on the line because then it'll become smaller. So I want to add a seam allowance in, and because I'm going to do a French seam, also something you'll see in a bit, I am going to actually make it about 2 centimeters bigger than it needs to be. I'm going to leave a gap here, let's say about that big, for your coat hanger's hook to go through. It doesn't have to be that big, but it's nice and comfortable size. And then I'm going to, about 2 centimeters away, I'm going to draw the outline of my coat hanger. But I'm not going to take it down here, okay? I'm just going to take it straight to the edge of my fabric. You'll see that in a second over here. And I repeat that on this side. Just get the shape you like, 2 centimeters-ish away from there, and then extend your line to the seam, to the edge of your fabric. So we're not going around the shape. We're just going to make the edges here square. Now, this is a mirror of each other. If you want to, you can draw one side and then flip it over, fold it in half, and then you can cut it as one side because then it will be mirrored and replicate what the other side is. I'm going to cut, let's see, I'm going to cut it at an angle to here, and then I'm going to cut down my line that I drew, and if I open it up, I've now got the shape of my hanger that I wanted. In addition to that, I don't want this to be a closed seam, so I'm going to just cut open the fold line. You may not have a fold line if you've used a piece of fabric with 2 separate pieces like that. Next thing we're going to do is decide what we want to do with the zip. On the other project, I actually put the zip around about here. So let's say our hanger is here. I put the zip around about here, and that's absolutely perfect, and it looks really nice. The only thing for me is that when I put my garment over my hanger, or I hung my garment onto the hanger, I found that the zip could be seen in the neckline of my shirt. So in the neckline, you could just pretend there's a shirt hanging on here and it's got a V-neck or something like that. You can just see the zip. And only because I'm a warrior that somebody would look in my wardrobe and see that zip and think, oh, I wonder what that is. I'm talking about thieves, by the way. So then I thought maybe it would be better right near the bottom so that when a shirt with a V-neck or a very scooped neck, you wouldn't be able to see the zip. So on this particular model, I am going to place the zip right at the bottom, but it's purely a design choice. It can be anywhere you like it, because what I did with mine was I hung my garment backwards so that the zip and the back of my shirt was there. So the scoop of the neck was up here, so you can't see the zip. Simple fix. You don't have to do that. The next thing you want to get yourself is a piece of fabric for your welt. Now that needs to be as long as the pocket you're going to make for your zip to go in. I'm going to make mine reasonably long, not as long as the zip. It doesn't have to be as long as the zip. You can use a zip that's too long, but you can't use one that's too short. Otherwise, you may not be able to get your coat hanger in through the hole. So I'm going to do it about yay big, which means I'm going to cut here. And on my welt pockets, I do like to give them a fair bit of space for turning the fabric around. And I promise you, this will all become clearer. I'm going to just judge where I want it. So I'm that lovely stripy fabric, so I can just cut along the line This would be in your interfacing if you wanted to, or it could be in an alternate fabric. It could be the same fabric. It could be lining paper, you know, the lining paper, not lining paper. It's like a woven backing that you use for embroidery and things. And that is what you're going to cut that out of. Now what we're going to do is, we'll need the machine in a minute. This is going to go onto here with the wrong side up towards you. In other words, the right side of the welt facing the right side of your one piece of fabric. So we can separate our fabric now. Piece, we'll call it the back, can go there. I'm going to place this in the middle somewhere. So my zip is going to go here, okay? That's where my zip is going to be. The next thing you do, you can glue this. You can stick it with sellotape. I'm going to pin that in place. And we are going to sew around it. Now, if you've got a pair of trousers, you may have seen a welt pocket on your trousers. And I can describe this to you as a post box, all right? So your post box has got a slot in it, and that's what that is. So we take a ruler. We want to draw a square. Now, you're a rectangle, because it's not a square, it's a rectangle. You need to be sewing either side of your zipper tape, okay? So the slot you're going to make mustn't be bigger than the tape. It must be much smaller. You only want the teeth of your tape, of your zipper tape, to stick through. It will become much clearer. So I know that this is about, 2 centimeters wide. So we can do a few things. I'm going to take these 2 end pins out because my ruler will rock otherwise. We're going to move our ruler onto here. Check how long we want to make our slot. I'm going to make it sort of in the middle of this. And I want to make it square to the base and square to the bag. So I'm going to put a central line here. Okay, a little bit smaller or shorter than my piece of lining. Okay, now move my zip out of the way. You may not be able to see that very well, but it's there. I'm going to put a line just below that or just above that. Doesn't matter. This could be your center line, and this could be, let me just show you, this could be your base, the bottom line of your rectangle, and then just above that, the same sort of distance away, because you want it to be a nice shaped rectangle. You want your other line. That's your sewing line. So the middle one is the cutting line. The top and the bottom are your sewing line. And then you want to join up your rectangle towards the end. And so you can sew across like that. This chalk is so fat. It's not the best for making fine markings. I would suggest you use something with a nice sharp point on it. Now you can pin it into place, nice and square to your fabric, please. Along here, many pins as you like, a bit of Prit or some removable glue. I don't fancy the glue idea, but you could use it. You can use a piece of sellotape, top and bottom, to hold it. Whatever you happen to have that helps you keep this from moving. Because you don't want it to be skewed. You don't want your zip to be. It could be a design choice, to be honest, but if it's even just slightly off, it looks like it's a mistake. We're now ready to go over to the sewing machine, and on a very short stitch length, I suggest 2 or 1.5. You're going to start in the center. You're going to sew to the corner, turn, come down the narrow part of your rectangle and go all the way across, up, and join back up to here. And that's what we're going to do first. Okay, I will set the camera up somewhere else and be back. Okay, we are back, and I'm at my little Bernina 6. Beg your pardon. I'm back at a little Bernina 600. I will tilt it, see if you can see it. She's a little beauty. She's from 1961, I think, or 1960 maybe. So there she is. And that's what I'm going to be sewing at. I've got my zip, which I don't need yet. I've got my lining for my welt pocket / pillar box. I've got my lines drawn on here, and I'm going to set my machine to a nice shortage stitch length. I'm going to do it just under 2, and I'm going to start on one of the middle sides. Don't start in a corner because that's the weakest part, and if you start on the corner, then you might have a missing stitch in the corner, and it's important that each corner has a proper stitch into the corner for this type of pocket, this slot. So we're going to line our work up. I'm going to do it as close as I can to the line, and then I'm going to start sewing. So pardon the noise. Okay. Make your way to the corner and stop with your needle into the corner. Turn your work with your needle into the work, please, because that'll give you a proper stitch. And then to the next corner, also stop with the needle in. I'm more or less using the lines that I drew as a guide, because if it doesn't reach exactly into the corner, I'm able to just make it work so that it's a nice straight line by using the stripes on this fabric. Quite convenient. But you want to go all the way around without any of this moving, so that your pocket is right. I've gone 1 stitch over the corner, so I'm going to go 1 stitch over the corner. Doesn't matter. I'm just going to sew down towards the next corner, and I'm into the corner now. Turn around and just take the pins out. They're not necessary because I've already stitched the top down, the top row, and now I'm going to come back towards my starting point, and I want to go a few stitches over the stitches that I started on, and that will anchor it nicely. And that is done. Right, trim that off. Oh, where's my proper trimming scissors? Trim off your threads, because we don't like threads. Trim as you go, guys. It's really important, because at the end of a garment, you do not want to be trimming threads. Hundreds of threads. Well, I've now sewn all the way around. You can just about see it on this side here. Now what we are going to do is we're going to cut our post box. I want you to go into the middle and pucker it together, make a crease. But I want you to make sure the lines of sewing are on top of each other, front and back. And that's super important, because what you're going to be doing now is using that as a way to cut a hole in the exact center of your 2 lines of stitches. Okay, there's my little slit in the middle of my 2 rows of stitches. That allows me to get my scissors into this hole and continue up that center line between the 2 rows of stitches. You will have drawn one probably. When you're a couple of centimeters from each end, stop, and we're going to do a Y shape cut you know, like on forensics, the Y shape on the chest when they do an autopsy. So there you go. So I'm going to cut from the slot I've just done. I'm going to turn my scissors and I am going to cut exactly into the corner of my slot. Do not go over it, because if you cut your threads, you will have to restitch it. And that's not nice to have to do. So you want it to be absolutely as close as you can into that corner without cutting the corner. And the reason for that is because it'll turn much better. If you go too far, it will actually fray. Now, if you were really studious, which clearly I am not, I would have used my machine to zigzag or hem this little piece of lining, let's call it. But quite frankly, for this little sample, and I'm not gifting it to anybody. If I was gifting it to somebody, I would definitely do that, but you don't need to. Now, the beauty of using the interfacing is that you put the glue side up towards you. When you get to this point and you're posting this lining through the letterbox, what happens is the glue side is now going to be on the back. You can actually go and iron that when you iron your letterbox, and it'll iron it to the other side, which is a really nice, neat finish. So that's what you want to do. Now, normally I would go to the iron and I would press this before I even did the cutting. Forgot to say that. Go and press your seams. Always press every single seam you sew before you move on to the next step. And that's because it pulls the fabric and the thread together, so it makes a nice tight bond and it lies really smooth and flat. And that's one of the reasons your garment will look professional as opposed to homemade. So we're going to take this and we want to post these seams through the letterbox. So I'm going to just give them a fold over, because that's where they're going to go. And I'm going to just, with my nail, you can of course use a bone, one of these. It's a bone turner, pointer, scraper, all sorts. I love this tool. And this is the old-fashioned one. It is actually made from bone. You get the more modern plastic ones now, but they wear out. So I've just made a crease along there. That all that does is makes it turn really neatly. I'm going to repeat that on the other side. Give it a nice crease. This, by the way, is so much easier on the iron. The problem is the iron is on the other side, which means A, I've got to go somewhere else. B, I've got to set it up, which I haven't done, and I don't feel like it. And then we can do the end two folds as well. Crease it along just that edge there, and crease it along this edge here. Now, when you post it through the letterbox slot, it's going to fold over really nicely. So fold that if you want to. You can pin it. If you're going to pin and then iron, make sure you're using pins that are either designed to be receive heat or glass-headed pins. Don't use plastic pin heads. They are rubbish for ironing boards. So there's my slot. I'm popping this all the way through, pulling it under as I go. I want to tuck it in. You don't have to tuck this fabric in, by the way. There is another method you can use, which I might show you in a second, but not for this project. For this project, we want it to be tucked fully into there. And you can see I do a lot of creasing with my thumbnail. It's something that over the years I've just always done, and it, it's so convenient. It's already on the end of your finger. Seriously, I don't have to pick up a tool. Tuck the top end in and pull it to the back really nicely, and that'll give you a really lovely corner. You don't want it to be puckered in the corner. So it starts out sometimes with a little bit of a pucker, and then you just give it a bit of a gentle press, and you will have a beautiful corner. If you don't, you possibly need to trim another, as a cut into the corner. Maybe you haven't cut into the corner enough. There, that's lying really nice. And we'll do the same to this side. And I'll just show you a little bonus trick you can do if you want to hide your zip completely. That's what we are after. We're after a slot. There's our top of our hanger, and there's the slot we've created for our zip. But let's say I want to hide the zip and make it less obvious that it's there. I don't have to tuck this under completely. I could fold it in half. I'm going to turn it over. I could do this. I could fold it upwards like that. I'm going to put a pin in there just so I can show you. And I could do that. I'm just doing it really roughly because this is not what we're doing. And like so. When we turn it over now, you can see you got this lovely contrast on the side, and it actually will cover the teeth of your zip at the same time. So that is one way you could do it slightly differently. So your choice, absolutely however you want to do it. And actually, I really like that. So I'm going to go with that. What I've got to do next is add the zip. We want to put the zip face up, teeth up, and tab upwards, okay? Because when we've put it into the bag, we want to be able to obviously open the bag up. So to do that, keep it closed for now. And you want to place the hole over your zip. And this top line, you're going to stitch down here. In my case, it's a contrast, so it's nice and easy. I'm going to stitch right here on the edge of this part of my rectangle, and that must line up with my zip. So I'm going to flip this up for you to show you what I mean. So in this case, because do you know what? I'm not going to do that because I think it's just going to be a bit confusing. But you're lining it up in almost an identical fashion if you are using a little decorative piece to stick out. But we're not. I'm going to put this back down the way I'm teaching the class to do it. And you can put a couple of pins in there. By now you will have ironed it, so it's going to stay nice and flat anyway. Mine isn't ironed, so I'm going to put a couple of pins in there just to keep it. So there you go. My zip is going to go into that slot. It's a bit bigger than I need, but that's perfect. I want to have it in the middle so that the metal bits, the metal pieces on the ends of my zip don't interfere with my sewing machine. So I'm going to pop it underneath my welt pocket, the slot. I'm going to line it up so that it sticks over the hole. There's the end of my slot. There's the end of my zip. And I'm going to just, for ease to show you, I'm going to put a pin there to keep it in place while I do the rest. Try and keep your zip's teeth in the middle of your post box slot. Okay, so there we've got that. We're going to now put some pins in. Put the pins in based on the direction you're going to sew. I'm going to be sewing this way around. So I want all my pins to face, the points of the pins to face the needle of the machine. That means I can pull the heads out this way, and I don't have to try and get the pins out underneath the presser foot, which is a real pain. There you go. Now, this is where, actually, if you have sellotape, I don't, but I do have this Mad Christmas tape, and it's so not sticky. But I'm going to show you what you could do. You could stick it to the fabric if you really wanted to, instead of pinning. Now you want to make sure that your slot is the same all the way around. So I'm going to put that there. I'm going to move this a little because it's not quite centered. This one out a bit and then pop my tape down like that. You can see it's narrowing over here. That needs to be fixed. But for now, I'm happy with that. So go along and tape or pin your zip all the way around. I'll put a few more pins in along the zip to show you. One pin there. Remember, I'm putting them in as if I'm sewing down my sewing machine line like that. You want to keep the slot of your post box the same as the width you started off with. You know, unfortunately, sometimes you might have a gap which is bigger as you're sewing. It's not the end of the world for this project, but try and keep it nice and even. The only way you're going to do that is by hand stitching it with basting stitches all the way down, pinning or gluing or taping it. So when we come to the end here, my teeth, my tab for my zip is there. We're going to be careful when we get there. I will show you that. So starting back up here, line up my letterbox slot, and I'm pinning these 2 layers of fabric, because remember I've got the main fabric and the lining fabric now, and I'm pinning through them into the tape of the zip, the zipper tape it's called. Because the zipper tape starts out just as a piece of tape, which they then insert the teeth into. This would be so much easier if it was ironed. It wouldn't be so bumpy and lumpy. But you know what? What can I say? Don't feel like going and getting an iron out. All right. It's a little bit closed in here. This one needs to go out a bit more because you can see, I hope, that my pillar box was getting a bit narrow over here. My slot. And I will fix that as we're going along. Next, you go to your sewing machine and we're going to repeat that process that we did for the welt pocket. We're going to go all the way around the slot with a straight stitch, not catching the teeth. And if you've made a big enough slot, you probably won't need to replace your presser foot. If it's a very narrow slot, because that also looks nice, you would probably want to put your zipper foot onto your machine if you have one. I'm going as close to the edge of the fabric as I can, through all the layers and into the zip. I just want to pull that out because that's just, that pin's not even holding anything in place. It's okay. All right. So we keep going. I'm coming up to a corner, and this corner that I'm coming up to is where my tab is. I have got to be careful and stop when I get there. One stitch over the post box slot. Because now I have got to get in here before I do the small line of stitches down the rectangle, and I've got to open my zipper teeth. All right. I've now opened the zip a little bit. As a result, I've now got to reline up the opposite side tape because the top one is now sewn down, but this one isn't. So I'm going to make sure my teeth are touching each other in the middle of my seam. Just going to squidge them together, and I'm going to slowly go over the end. Now, if you are using a metal zip, you don't want to do that. You want to skip over the zip teeth and do that by hand because you will otherwise snap your needle. Right, we are heading back. Just be careful here because my machine, it slipped a little bit on the teeth at the top here, so I'm going to have a little bit of a skew piece. Now going to leave my machine's needle in the down position, and I'm going to close my zip because otherwise it's just in the way. And I'm going to continue down the line to close the rectangle up. So I'm on the second long side of my rectangle at this point. You can see my fabric wants to pucker, and that is purely because I have not used the iron on it. Making sure all my layers are still lovely and neat. When you come to the tape, you have a choice to peel it off, or you can sew over the tape and the stitches will tear the tape off for you afterwards. There's a little pucker here wanting to form, so I'm going to put the needle down and I'm going to stretch my fabric out under the presser foot so that it doesn't actually do that. I'm going to leave that tape in just to show you how it works. Guys, I forgot to take the pin out of the bottom here. That's important. You do that before you ride over it. And that's where the metal end tab of the zip is. Don't go as far as that because you will break your needle. Because even on a plastic zip, those ends are metal. I don't suppose they're on all of them, but in this case it is. One stitch over the rectangle to give me the seam allowance I want. And now I'm heading back. See, just towards the end of there, the teeth push your presser foot out of the way, which is a pain because it's not then perfect. But, you know, I'm not going for perfection. I should do, but I'm not. Trying to do a teaching video rather than a... Now you want to go back over the stitches you started at, and if you want to, you can go back a little and forward a little until it's finished. That was not very neat. I'll show you now. Try and do better. You want to really get your stitches exactly over the top and not do that. But it's not bad. It's not bad. Right, we have got the tape here. You can see I've sewn through the tape. And now when you peel it, it just literally rips the tape because of the small stitches. And then you pull it off and you're done. Get rid of that. And I use tape for putting on buttons on my sewing machine as well. I like the what's the Scotch one that's opaque colour. Now you would go and iron this, but you should have a zip that opens up. There you go. So you've installed a zip, people. If you've not done that before, this is a wonderful way to learn how to install an easy zip. And you could do that as a decorative way of doing it on your machine or whatever. So now on the back, you can see our zip is smaller than we need it. And you could cut those ends off. I don't suggest using your best scissors for this. Certainly not if you've got metal teeth on your zip. Definitely not. But these plastic ones are fine. And do not cut the underneath fabric while you're doing this. So just shorten that. You don't have to, but I will be. We are done with that part of the bag. So we're going to grab the other half. And this is where we start to sew it together. First thing I'm going to do is on this little top section, I'm going to do a little rolled hem like so. Just fold it over about a centimetre, half a centimetre, twice, and then just close the seam up so it's neat. All right, trim the edges. To show you that again. On this one, right side is down in this case. You fold it, roll it over once, and then you roll it over the same again. And you just stitch close to the inside folded edge, not the outside edge. You want to have it downwards, don't you? So this is not in the fabric, they're in the seam. And then just straight across. You don't have to anchor it, double reverse or anything, because that seam is going to get closed in anyway. Trim off your threads. We're now going to do a French seam. What is a French seam? French seam is fantastic. A, it's really strong. B, it's really comfortable. And you will often find it in children's clothing because it's soft and nice against the skin. You use it a lot on lingerie, things like that. You're going to put, how did this one land up so much smaller than this one? I have no idea. So what I'm going to do, I have absolutely no idea how that happened. So I'm going to just roll it over once more and do another row of stitching so that it's more of a similar size. I cut them the same. I have no idea how the one landed up taller than the other. But no bother. There we go. We've got the back. We've got the front. And this is why French seams are so odd. You don't put the right sides together. You put the wrong sides together, which seems totally counterintuitive. Okay? So you put the one on there, line up those edges, line up those edges, and line up your sides as well. You take it to the machine, and we are going to sew about, let's say, 5 millimeters or so. You could even do a centimeter. I'm going to do it the width of my presser foot away from the edge. I'm going to first sew straight down where I did that little hem for the top where the coat hanger hook goes through. Then I'm going to pivot and I'm going to come down this diagonal. Do not pull on this diagonal edge. When you've got a diagonal edge, it is very stretchy and you do not want to stretch your fabric. So you need to be really gentle with it. Just let it pull itself through the machine and do a straight stitch all the way to the corner. And then we're going to turn around, needle down, turn around and come down to the bottom corner. Needle down. If you want to do a decorative pom-pom edge, lace trim, whatever, you can do that as well now. We're now sewing together the bottom edge of the bag. This is your safe, your fabric safe. Oh, I've got a crease. So annoying. I'm not going to unpick it because I think it'll fix itself on the French seam. Into the corner, needle down, pivot, come up the long edge. Needle down and come up the diagonal edge. Now, I've made my seam much bigger than I need because I want to trim off this selvage. The selvage is the edge of the fabric on the loom. When I get to the top here where the hook comes through, I'm going to stop and I'm going to pivot and do it straight up. I don't have to because I've actually left enough space for just the hook of the coat hanger to come through, but there you go. Right, next, trim your seam. If you've left a long seam, you want to trim it down to about 5 millimeters. And I might be able to show you, I might insert a picture here for you to look at. I specifically left one of my seams on my other sample bag a little bit too wide. So when I came to turn it round, my sewing, the raw edge of my fabric with its little tassels on it stuck through my seam on the right side. And it's probably quite difficult to envision that, but I'll show you what I mean in a bit. Go all the way around, cutting down your first seam allowance. It can be 1 centimeter wide, it can be 1/2 centimeter wide, but it needs to be narrower than your final seam, which we're going to do in a minute, and I'll show you that. So there's my bits I'm cutting off. Come up here so you can see. This is the selvage. This is the edge that doesn't fray. And now we are going to cut our corners off. Do not cut your stitches. Only the corners, not the stitching, just the tip of these points. And that allows this to turn better. And where there is an insy rather than an outsy, oh, I haven't cut this edge yet. I'll show you now. You want to do a snip inwards towards the seam so it turns nicely as well. So I've cut off all my corners, and here where I turned to do a right angle, I'm just going to put a little snip there so it turns nice and neatly. Right, get rid of all of that. Now you open up your zip. Look there. Alpaca. Turn it round to the wrong side. So we want it wrong side out now. And this is where you would go to the sewing machine. You would go to the iron and you would iron this beautifully. But I'm not. Do what I say, not what I do. Isn't that what they say? Yeah, I do that all the time. Sorry, guys. Poke your corners out nicely. Make sure you've got nice sharp points on your corners. Okay, if you need to, here's your little bone tool, remember? And you gently poke them out. Don't poke so hard that you press the whole thing through the hole. Make a big hole in the corner. The other way to do it is if you've got a nice sturdy pin or needle, very dangerous this, you can just pull it out and push it with your pin. However, from personal experience, you could, of course, pull the thread through, so be careful. So we've now got our bag inside out. We're going to go press this seam really nice and flat. You must make sure that the seam where the stitches are is fully flat like this. You don't want it to be folded with fabric inside. That seam must be at the very edge of your pressing, where you press it, okay? So I'm going to do that with my fingers as usual. Doesn't have to be perfectly flat, but it is nice if it is flat. Pull out your little collar you made at the top there. Be careful on this bias edge because it stretches, remember? Don't stretch it. Crease that flat. And then you're going to stitch all the way around. Look at that. That's atrocious. How have I managed that? I will fix that with a stitch in a bit. I'll show you what I've done. I am going to now sew from here all the way around the bag again, but with a seam allowance bigger than the cut edge I just did. So mine is about 5 millimeters. So if I do mine about 1 centimeter wide, or the width of my presser foot, I think that will enclose the seam very nicely. I'm going to start up here to anchor my little neck edge, let's call it, where the hook goes. Just reverse a couple of stitches, and then this can be a regular stitch length of about 2.5 on your machine. And we are going to just go all the way around. So if I can figure it out, my software, I might actually speed the section up. But I've never done it before, so who knows whether it'll work. Okay, look how lovely that seam is. It's so nice and neat, and that's the inside of your garment, if this was a garment. So you can see how lovely that would be on the inside of a garment if you wanted it perfectly pretty and smooth. I'm just going to pull out, because I haven't ironed it yet again. I'm still saying that. What am I doing? You know, I can realize I'm off camera. I have this terrible habit. I don't do this just all the time, but with all my own garments and clothes, I lick my fingers and then they're grippy on the fabric, much better. And then you can roll your seams with your thumb and your finger like this, which you can't do because your fingers are probably a bit dry. And that helps roll out your seams so well. Another thing that, you know, like, it's not another tool, so you don't have to grab it. It's right there on the end of your hand. All for simple and quick simplification, eh? Now, I think the presser foot pressure, which is how much force is on your fabric when you put your presser foot down, mine is not very strong, because I noticed when I pulled this, it actually pulled my work towards me a couple of stitches. Always then, if that happens on your machine, leave your needle in the down position. Okay, one more corner here, turn, remember, needle in the down position. These dots on here, by the way, are where the loom holds all the warp threads. No, the weft threads. Needle down, final row, fingers. So I've made mine much bigger than it needs to be, the seam, because I made the bag big enough to allow for that. Now I'm going to just go straight up to the neck and do a little back stitch, and we are done. Trim off your threads. I've already trimmed off this side. And technically, well, not technically, your bag is done. Now, you would iron it. Remember, iron every seam. And now you're going to turn it right sides out. These, just fold them over like that when you grab them and pull them to the right side to make a nice pointy. These will be much more difficult to have a point because of the bulk of the French seam. But there, we can try and get it a little bit better than that. And then turn it, get to the other corners, hold that down. I'm going to fold it towards my thumb and push it through, and then just give it a little push like that. Same thing here, fold that, push it through, and then make it as flat and as neat as you can in that corner. And then, of course, to the neck of the bag, which is now tiny compared to what I started with. Oh, my word, look what I've done. Okay, doesn't matter, but you don't want to do that. Look here, I'm going to have to cut that little point of fabric off. My bag is complete, if a bit boring. I would love to decorate it a bit. Go to your machine and your iron it lovely and flat. I'm just cutting that little point off so I can't see it. I like to show you these things that I make mistakes on because it's important for us to acknowledge. We all make mistakes, even somebody like me who's been sewing forever. Right, a beautiful press would be so nice about now. I'll probably take a photo and show you. Look at that, you have a bag. Now, I'll grab my coat hanger. And hopefully I haven't made the hole too small to get my hanger in. You pin it up, put the one side of the hanger in, chivvy this until it goes through the hole, comes out the hole and down the neck, and then get your hanger in. Now the top of your hanger should be along that edge because you cut it that shape. Look at that. Isn't that a thing of amazing cleverness and beauty? Zip it up and you are done. Can you see? Now what you do is, what have I got? What have I got? I've got my hubby's jumper that's been sitting here for about 2 years waiting to have patches put on the pocket. And as an example, let's say I want to hang something. I've got some precious scissors and money and I don't know, tape. Whatever you've got that's precious, put it in there. Grab a garment of your choice and put it onto your coat hanger. I don't have to teach you how to do that. And voila, we have a hanger. Safe. I'm going to turn the camera a little bit this way, upwards and downwards, and I'm going to show you what we've done. Look at that. That now looks like a decorated or fabric covered hanger from here, and you can't tell that I got some treasure hidden in there, can you? I'm going to take that back off and throw that over here. And you can see I've got some stuff in there. Nice press, et voila. Passports, money, telephones, whatever you like. So we are done, peeps. We are done. Well done for following along, and I hope to see pictures of your beautiful makes. I would love to put some lace along the bottom here, put a name on here, a plique. It's just super boring, but my other one is really pretty. So I'm pleased with that. I'm really pleased with that. So both samples are ready for the class on the 30th and 31st of May. And you have learned to do cutting out your own pattern. You've learned to make a postbox slot or a welt pocket slot. And you've learned how to insert a zip into that. You've learned that you can stitch through your zip, cut it shorter if you want to, if you've only got a long zip. You have learned to do a French seam. I showed you basically how you could make a little contrast cover that would hide the zip. And what else? I don't know, just generally learned a few bits and pieces as we went along. But that's it for today. Have a fabulous day, everybody. God bless, and I'll see you again on Hesketh Emporium. Bye-bye.